Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Dr. Saray Eaton, and I am a volunteer with AARP. And I welcome you to the Ask the Doctor event series that we're doing today. We're going to be talking about what works and what doesn't in regards to weight loss. From those weekly injections that everyone is talking about to intermittent fasting and even more. This is the first event in AARP's five-part series, Ask the Doctor. We're going to be hosting this every month through May, and we're so glad that you could join us for this initial discussion on weight loss. Being overweight isn't good for you, plain and simple. We all know that. It increases your risk of stroke. It increases your risk of heart disease, and it increases your risk of type 2 diabetes. But that's not all. Being overweight affects your mobility by adding stress to your knees, your ankles, your hips. In fact, doctors will tell you that for every 1 pound you lose, it can reduce the load on your knees by 4 pounds. That means that if you lose 10 pounds of weight, there will be 40 pounds less weight in each step for your knees to take. Extra weight is widespread concern. And most of the time, we all have wrestled with it at some time or other. According to the CDC, actually, 78% of men and 69% of women over the age of 60 are overweight, and 15 to 40% actually are obese. It's a big problem, and that problem has spurned a big industry of weight loss, get quick options, quick weight loss options. But which ones work and which ones don't? Which ones are dangerous? That's what we're here to talk about today. We have with us today a medical expert who's going to give you his insights on these issues. But then we're going to turn it over to you, the audience. We reserve the majority of our time today for you to ask questions. But first, let's hear from our Ask the Doc expert. Dr. McGeorge, you will, I welcome you today. He is a medical expert who works in a number of different areas. You may have seen him in the emergency room at Henry Ford Hospital, or he also is on the board of the Michigan chapter of the American College of Emergency Physicians, board director, member of the Red Cross as well. He's also on the editorial board and reviewer for a number of medical publications. And he's here today to share his wisdom on weight loss, as well as just offering a service to the community. As a reminder to the audience, if you do have questions, please enter your questions into the chat, and we will try to answer as many questions as possible in the time that we have. So let me welcome Dr. Frank McGeorge.
Hey, thanks, Dr. Eaton. I really appreciate it. You know, just as an aside, the biggest reason that I have some relevance in this particular space, that is weight loss, is that I'm also the medical expert, if you will, the medical reporter for Channel 4 News, WDIV in Detroit. And so in addition to my role in the emergency department, I spend a great deal of time studying and reporting on trends in medicine in general. But the thing is, weight loss comes up a great deal. So before I answer questions, or before we get to questions, I kind of want to lay some groundwork so we're on the same page when it comes to my thoughts on weight management. So weight loss has been a hot topic for as long as I can remember. And honestly, it comes up pretty much in every aspect of my role on the news, whether it's some new weight loss breakthrough or maybe just the annual effort to lose weight through a New Year's resolution, which, by the way, if any of you have been following the football season, you probably saw the ads pointing out that Quitter's Day, that's the day when most people give up on their New Year's resolutions, has already come and gone. The thing about that is, unfortunately, that is pretty much the case with a lot of diets. And that brings me to one thing I really want to point out. Any dietitian or physician or weight loss guru out there, we all come from a biased perspective. We are all biased by what we've seen work for ourselves and what we've seen work for other people, and also how much we believe in the science versus the theory, or unfortunately, as I've seen on social media, frankly, just making some stuff up. So you have to have an understanding of where I'm coming from. And I'm going to just tell you, I believe in looking at the data and the science. In my mind, any new weight loss regimen, it really has to hold up to the rigor of not only making sense physiologically, in other words, how it could work by theory, but also ultimately how well it works based on long-term scientific evidence. And I say that because the biggest issue is really long-term sustainability. I would actually argue pretty strongly that anybody that pays attention to what they are eating, so if you are on a specific diet, you are paying attention to what you are eating, you are going to lose weight simply because you're now focusing on what goes into your mouth and probably maybe even paying a little more attention to how much energy you use. The problem is, unless you can incorporate those changes into your lifestyle and into your life in general, it's just not sustainable. And that's really my biggest message more than anything. Any life change that you make to adjust your weight needs to be something that is sustainable over the course of your life. These are long-term habits that you need to form. Now, something else I want to emphasize. Anyone's weight is essentially the product of two things. How many calories your body absorbs, and absorbs is my choice of words, how many calories your body absorbs, and how much energy you burn. Now, of course, there are nuances in terms of what you eat, how you eat it, how you choose to expend your calories, maybe in terms of building muscle or having more calories burning from aerobic exercise. But the bottom line is, no matter how many times people might suggest that it's more than calories in and calories out, I disagree. Science basically supports calories in, calories out. And all of the, whether it's diets or medications, basically play off of some aspect of that. So specifically with regard to medications, there are a limited number of ways that they can affect a person's weight. Maybe they inhibit how certain foods are absorbed. Maybe they alter your metabolism, allowing you to burn more. Even the breakthrough GLP-1 agonist medications like Wegovy and Saxenda, or a lot of people, they use the term Ozempic, but it's actually Wegovy. They modify your weight by changing your appetite, and that changes how many calories you take in. There is no other real magic to it than that. Now, that's not to say there aren't other important elements to any weight loss regimen, but you always have to bear in mind, calories in, calories out. So next, I kind of want to address diets. Most weight loss regimens are going to change how people eat in what I'm going to say is a somewhat unnatural way. Whether you choose to eliminate, let's say, all carbohydrates in your diet, or you choose to only eat lean proteins, or you choose to only eat vegetables, none of those are necessarily the ideal way that our bodies are meant to function. Now, I should also point out that all of our bodies are different. And so what works for one person isn't always going to work for another person. And of course, that's part of the problem with these weight loss programs. They don't work for everyone because they're not designed for everyone. And even when you study them in groups that are not exactly the same as you, the results don't apply properly. So in either case, that's why I tend to be more of a fan of what I would call natural, sensible approaches, like for example, the Mediterranean diet. If you're just sensible about how you eat, you are more likely to be able to create habits that you can continue through your life. Now, there's a couple other comments I want to make up front, especially because I'm talking to the AARP. I really want to emphasize that there are natural changes in our bodies. And by the way, for the record, I am 58 years old and I actually do qualify for AARP membership. There are natural changes in our bodies that occur as we age that make weight loss more of a challenge. We naturally lose muscle mass as we age because of hormonal changes. That loss in muscle mass means that we have to basically decrease our ability to burn calories. And really kind of what I'm saying there is if you eat the same amount of food over your entire life, as you get older, you are just not going to be able to burn those calories the same way. And so they end up stored as fat, and you eventually naturally gain weight. In fact, there's pretty good research that shows most men continue to gain weight through their 50s, and most women, that's me, through my 50s, continue to gain weight through their 60s. Now, for many, ultimately, that weight will begin to drop off as we get even older and we lose more muscle mass, but that's not the case for everyone. Now, some of our weight loss in older age is actually due to a change in lifestyle. We lose more muscle mass, we have more aches and pains, we move less, we burn fewer calories, but then it leads to weight gain because even though we lose muscle mass and we're doing less, we're eating the same amount. So we end up gaining weight. There are also hormonal changes that clearly affect how much we weigh and maintain. And of course, there are genetic issues that we have no control over. So one thing I really want to emphasize is that as a society, I think people don't pay enough attention to what they eat. There's been a pretty consistent move away from what I consider to be natural basic ingredients toward what I'm going to say is processed ingredients. And I've got to tell you, it's my opinion that these processed ingredients are designed to sell you more food. And in a way, they are, in fact, addictive. So if you're like me, for example, I'm going to say, I love Big Macs and Taco Bell. It's that simple. Unfortunately for me, I also know how bad it is to eat them every day. And I would probably choose to eat a Big Mac and Taco Bell every single day if I could, but I know that food was specifically designed and built to bring me back to McDonald's and Taco Bell every day. Now, that's not to say it's a conspiracy or anything like that, but I'm saying it's just good business. The specifics of adding things like highly refined sugars and certain types of fats that are more irresistible to our palate is just good business, but it is not good health. And we need to start thinking about paying attention to every single thing that we put into our mouths and make choices that are healthier. That doesn't mean you can't have the occasional Big Mac, but overall, I don't think enough Americans make good choices about what they choose to eat. Now, I'm going to address the elephant in the room, and that's the value of GLP-1 agonists. I think that's what a lot of people are really interested in these days. There is absolutely no doubt in my mind that this has completely changed the landscape of weight management. These medications are effective and powerful at reducing appetite and ultimately body weight, and therefore all of them are valuable. And by reducing your body weight, it reduces all of the effects that stem from being overweight. One thing that I say repeatedly, though, that I think is important is that if something has an effect, it has a side effect. Now, some of these side effects of GLP-1s are obvious and they're well known. For example, they can cause nausea, vomiting. They delay gastric stomach emptying. They can cause pancreatitis. They also change some of your endocrine function. The question is simply, long-term, whether the benefit outweighs the risk. Clearly, weight loss is a huge benefit that generates a great deal of other benefits. And that is important to keep in mind. Unfortunately, what I have also seen over my 30-plus year career in medicine is that many drugs that were the cat's meow one day were suddenly slapped with a black box warning and withdrawn from the market a few years later, because when you begin to deploy drugs over millions and millions and millions of people, you begin to see other effects that you never would have guessed because there were mechanisms that were simply unanticipated. I'll give you a super simple example. There was a commonly used antibiotic called levofloxacin, Levaquin. You might have heard of it. It was the greatest thing since sliced bread, and it covered all respiratory infections extremely well. And it was a darling of infectious disease specialists in emergency medicine. It was given once a day, fabulous drug. But over the course of several years of giving millions and millions of doses, reports began to appear that it was causing problems with people's tendons. And a lot of doctors thought, well, that doesn't make any sense. And they doubted it at first. But after time, it was clear that it was a real effect. And our use actually began to drop a little bit, and it became more thoughtful. They are still great antibiotics. They're still important when our choices are limited, but we don't use them as aggressively or maybe as casually as we used to. The reason I tell you that story, and the point to it is, when you use a medication long enough, over enough of a population, you begin to see unusual effects. And my concern with GLP-1 agonists is that in time, we may see some unusual effect. I frankly have no idea what it will be, but it is clearly something that anyone will need to pay attention to going forward in the future. But right now, GLP-1 agonists, we're talking the Ozempic, Wegovy, Saxenda, Zepbounds of the world, are great drugs. So finally, before we go to questions, I want to make two final comments. One, a warning, and one, some good news. So first, the warning. Because we're talking about weight loss, one really important aspect of weight loss that I want to point out as we get older is that sudden, unexpected weight loss is not a good thing. So I know a lot of people might say, hey, I'm losing weight. That's great. Unfortunately, as we get older, that sudden, unexpected weight loss can actually mean that there's something else going on that is much more concerning or serious, and you need to talk to your doctor about that. And, I'm talking about things like cancer that jumps to mind, but there are frankly other medical problems outside of cancer that become relevant to sudden, unexpected weight loss. And now I'm going to give you some good news. A little extra weight as we age is not all bad. In fact, there is good research that shows having some extra weight, and I'm talking the overweight category. So, there's your ideal body weight, and then there's overweight, and then there's obese. Being a little overweight, a little extra weight as you get older is healthy, and it's actually protective. And it's been called the obesity paradox in older people. So the thing is, our reserve against illness and injury as we age is somewhat dependent on what we can eat. And when we become sick, we cannot eat, we lose weight, and there's actually a point where that's harmful. And essentially, what the research shows is that people who are older and have a little extra weight on board are more likely to survive a sudden downturn in their medical health than someone who is essentially too thin. And so I guess I'm going to call that a little good news, that sometimes a little extra weight is not all bad. And with that, I will stop talking and see what questions you might have. I think you're on mute.
Yeah. Thank you very much for all that information. Thank you so much. We have a lot of questions. I'm going to start with Susan. She says, I'm 43. I have kept a food journal and eat between 17 and 1,800 calories per day, but don't lose any weight. I'm 243 pounds right now. I have a family history of obesity. Can you discuss heredity and obesity?
Yeah, absolutely. So heredity plays an enormous part on it. I mean, diabetes and other cardiometabolic problems are highly genetically tied. And the fact of the matter is, you can predict your body weight as an adult by looking at your parents and grandparents to a degree. Now, there have been changes over the decades. So what I mean by that is, let's say if you looked at adults in the 1950s and compared them to adults in the 1990s or 2000s now, we have consistently become heavier over time. And that is for two reasons, primarily. One is because we now have access to things like television and the internet and more cars and less physical activity than we did in, say, the 1950s. The other is, in the 1950s, there was more what I, again, refer to as natural unprocessed food around and less high fructose corn syrup and processed foods designed to essentially get us to buy more I'm going to call it junk food or processed food. In either case, my point is genetics are important, but by looking at family photos from the 1950s and looking at family photos from the 2000s, you're not going to get the same picture because our lifestyles and diets have actually changed between then and now. What I will tell you, sort of on a different note relative to your situation, you're paying attention to your calories, you're doing everything right, and you're having trouble losing weight, do not despair. That is not uncommon. And it is not someone's fault. It is not your fault. I would argue strongly that a lot of it ties to our lifestyles and what we eat. So even though you're eating a very sensible number of calories, if all of those calories are in foods that are absorbed heavily and more likely to get turned into fat, then that's not necessarily going to be beneficial for losing weight. But I will tell you, with the GLP-1s, that equation has changed completely, because with the GLP-1s, we are now able to modify someone's diet, or someone's appetite, I should say, to the point that they will lose weight. So it's not to say that I'm pushing GLP-1s at all. I just do recognize the simple fact that they have been a game changer. But to answer your question, genetics play an enormous part, but you have to look at the effect of lifestyle and diet over time within your family as well, when you're factoring all of that in. Hopefully that answers your question.
Thank you. Sarah wants to know, would Ozempic interfere with some of her other medications like rosuvastatin, levothyroxine, and an SSRI?
So yeah, actually, any of the GLP-1s have the possibility to interact with other medications, if anything, because it alters your appetite and it alters the absorption of some medications. Now, that's not universal with all medications, and the specific medications that you mentioned, I wouldn't necessarily say that they're going to have an effect on most of them off the top of my head. You should talk to your doctor specifically about that, but I will say again that the GLP-1s can affect, so you mentioned thyroid medication in particular. It can affect, for example, your thyroid function as well as your pancreatic function, so insulin levels, that kind of thing. So there are going to be hormonal offshoots to the effect of GLP-1s that need to be monitored by your physician. And I should also add, when you're on a GLP-1, your weight changes. And so when your weight changes, the effect of medications change because now your weight is different. So the distribution across your old body and your new body is very different. So your need for certain medications, in particular, I'm thinking thyroid medications, might very well change as your body weight changes.
Okay, thank you. Pat says he doesn't hear much about Mounjaro, which is, again, is just another GLP-1, but he wants to know how much protein is needed while on these drugs.
Yeah, so that's actually a super important point. So what the primary way that these drugs affect your body weight is by decreasing your appetite. And if you just eat less of everything across the board, it means you're going to get less of everything into your body across the board. And that includes some important nutritious things. One of the important nutritious things is protein. And the reason I highlight protein is because one of the effects that we've noticed with GLP-1s as we're gaining more experience with them is that in addition to losing fat, people lose a disproportionate amount of muscle mass. And that is not good, because ultimately, bigger picture, if you decide to stop the GLP-1s, or you do stop the GLP-1s, when you have less muscle mass, you will now burn fewer calories and you will be more likely to rebound, gain weight. So you need to maintain your muscle mass, if anything, for that reason. But honestly, because big picture, it's just healthier to have more muscle mass, lean muscle mass than fat. I apologize for my cough. It's allergies. So when you are on a GLP-1, I can't emphasize enough, it is important to control your diet and pay attention to what you are eating, not only for the type of food, protein, but also the nutritional components, because you also don't want to become vitamin and mineral deficient. And the ideal would be that you work with your physician, who hopefully knows, or a dietitian who can retrain your thinking and your eating habits. Because here's the thing, if we suddenly don't crave Big Macs and Doritos anymore, and we don't crave food anymore, and we eat, and I've talked to lots of people who are on GLP-1s, and they tell me the common thread is, I'm just not as interested in food as I used to be. It's that simple. It's not it's not about being hungry. I'm not as interested in it as I used to be. Mm-hmm. Well, that means you do, but you still have to eat to live. So now you can make choices about what you want to eat. Now, some of them, you may say, oh, I like Big Macs, but you don't have to eat the whole Big Mac anymore. You can say, oh, I'm not really that hungry. I might want to eat a Big Mac, much like I might want to play tennis or watch Netflix. It's a choice. So you might have a little bit of a Big Mac for the taste, but then you say, but I need this amount of lean protein and I need these types of vitamins, because that's what I need to feed my body to stay healthy. And so that's where retraining your whole mind works. And that's why I think the GLP-1s may have an even bigger benefit, because really what happens is, or I shouldn't say, in my ideal world, what would happen is that people would not be on GLP-1s forever. And eventually, when you stop them, you would be able to maintain your weight loss. Now, research shows that a lot of people who stop GLP-1s do, in fact, regain a significant amount of their weight. Not everybody and not all of it, but it's not universal that you basically stay, keep that weight off. So that's where lifestyle and diet modifications that become a habit come into play. And I know that's way off course from your question, but I just want to mention Zepbound and Mounjaro. They're great drugs as well. In fact, we're to the point now that there's enough GLP-1s out there, different GLP-1s out there, that we're able to study them individually and try and make better predictions on which ones might be more effective at either weight loss or blood sugar management or whatever. So there are more nuances coming in further research. But of course, every company has a vested interest in pushing their own drug and doing research to say that they are better than the other guy's GLP-1. Yeah. So I'm a little jaded on that point.
Okay. Victoria wants to know, are sublingual semaglutide as effective as the shots? The drops are daily.
Yeah, so probably not actually, and it has to do with the duration of action, the effect of the absorption. So there's probably going to be some oral version of a GLP-1 available at some point. But right now, the injectable forms are really kind of the standard, if you will.
Okay. Michael says he's 15 to 20 pounds overweight. He can't seem to lose it no matter what I do. What do you suggest?
So welcome to my world. I'm about probably, and I'll just fess up, I'm probably about 10 pounds over what I would consider my ideal body weight. And I can't seem to shake it either. And I have just learned to accept it. 10 to 15 pounds, depending on what your baseline body weight in terms of a percentage is probably not that high. And it also depends on your age. What I would say is that we do naturally reach a plateau. We reach a weight that our body is, I'm going to say, happy with, comfortable with, that is healthiest for us. And as we age, depending on the ratio of muscle to fat, it's natural for us to lose a little muscle. That makes it more difficult to metabolize off that weight. We naturally gain a little more fat. I should mention, by the way, fat distribution is important. That is whether it's around your waist or around your hips, or whether it's internal around your organs. That's kind of a separate aside. But what I'm getting at is 10 to 15 pounds, if you're in, let's say, my weight category, which is about 170, 180 pound range, is not a crazy amount of overweight. And not knowing your age, that's another factor that goes into it. But what I would tell you is, you should not give up and just say, I'm going to just let it all go and eat a bunch of Big Macs and call it a day and get 30 pounds overweight. I would say that that's a pretty actually healthy range that you're in. And I wouldn't necessarily worry about it too much unless you have other medical problems. It's unlikely if you're only 10 or 15 pounds over that type 2 diabetes is an issue for you. But if, let's say, you have extreme hypertension or something like that, then maybe losing that extra 10 or 15 pounds might be helpful. I wouldn't go to a semaglutide or GLP-1. I would probably say in your situation, it would be better to look at, again, a dietitian with diet and exercise type thing.
Okay. I'm not quite sure what Pat's asking. Gastro issues on Mounjaro and solutions. That perhaps she's having gastro issues. Is that common?
You may very well be, and that's actually super common because, again, the way they work is by reducing your appetite, but the way they reduce your appetite is by slowing the speed at which your intestines move things, and particularly how fast your stomach empties. It basically slows your gastric emptying. So one of the main things there is that can become bad enough that people have to stop the medication. I have seen patients that basically had to stop a GLP-1 because they couldn't tolerate the nausea and the bloating and the basically like physiologic GI side effects of the GLP-1s. And those are unfortunately real issues. Sometimes dose adjustments can help, I will say, though.
Yeah. Amy says, is there a connection between Ozempic and I believe she's referring to lower extremity neuropathy?
No, not that I'm aware of. But I will say if you have lower extremity neuropathy and it's related to diabetes, then Ozempic is good because less diabetes is good. But I'm not aware of a direct effect of any of the GLP-1s on your peripheral nervous system.
Okay. If any guidance for weight loss post-menopausal?
Oh, well, so that's a super broad category, but I'll say this. Obviously, the issue with menopause is that hormone levels change. Those hormone levels alter the rate at which you make muscle and burn calories in an unfortunately negative way. So the biggest thing, again, is really it comes down to lifestyle. Now, I say lifestyle, diet, exercise, whatever combination you want to look at, in the way, or what I mean by that is it needs to be a habit through your life. It's not something that you do casually one day and then decide it's maybe not great the next day, unless, of course, you're considering it a cheat day, so to speak. Lifestyle is something that you maintain through your life. And so sometimes what ends up happening is when we have a life change, like menopause, and I'm going to say on the other end for young people, puberty, we have to adapt and we have to change the way we do things because now our bodies are fundamentally different than they were prior to that life change. And so postmenopausal, you're going to have changes in your fluids, you're going to have changes in your hormone levels, and you're going to have changes in your metabolic rate, the speed at which you burn calories. And you just have to make adjustments accordingly. And that does mean usually changes in diet and lifestyle, diet and exercise.
Okay. If food suppression no longer occurs while taking Ozempic, is it still working on keeping one's blood sugar levels low?
So I'm assuming you're saying, or I'm going to assume that you're saying that you are you're stopping the medication. If you were on the medication primarily or originally for blood sugar control, when you stop the medication, unless the weight has come off and now your blood sugar is in a normal range because you were a type 2 diabetic and now you're not anymore, your blood sugar issues will likely return. If you have lost the weight and you are no longer a type 2 diabetic, as many people find, then they will not have blood sugar control issues anymore. But that brings up an important side point that I should mention, if for those of you that weren't necessarily aware of it, the GLP-1s were originally put out there, if you will, for diabetes management, for blood sugar control. Weight loss was, I'm going to say, a fortunate, happy side effect. And now that has been parlayed into an actual effect.
Okay, great. Kitty says, does it matter the amount of weight you need to lose? She needs to lose about 40 pounds, tried several diets and programs, could only lose about 15 and get stuck there.
Yeah, so that's an interesting thing. When you're in the realm of weight loss, there is a plateau effect. So that happens for a couple of reasons, but just the most basic is when you lose weight, your body doesn't really understand that your body doesn't understand what your brain is trying to do. So your brain is like, well, I want to lose weight because it's healthy and that's good. And your body's like, well, right, but you're losing weight, and that makes your body scared because it's designed to preserve calories for times of famine. I mean, that's like what our bodies do naturally. Mm-hmm. So when you lose weight, all of a sudden your body says, whoa, 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 you're losing weight. I'm going to gear it back. And so your metabolism slows down. A lot of your internal hormonal functions change. And all of a sudden you were losing weight, and then you stop losing weight and it just plateaus. And getting over that hump can be difficult. And not, I shouldn't say impossible, but it can be really, really difficult. And that's potentially part of what you're experiencing. What I will say is that's where sticking with it becomes a thing. If you were 40 pounds over, there's a good chance that you would actually be a good candidate for a GLP-1 or something along those lines, some sort of pharmacologic assistance. But I'll tell you, even though I see the benefit of the GLP-1s unquestionably, and I think there are enormous long-term health benefits to be gained by anyone who is overweight on these medications, I am always concerned about the idea of using a medication for the rest of your life. And so, as much as you can, I guess, change and this is why I keep going back to the same thing. And I know it's repetitive and I know it's not sexy and it's not like magic or anything like that, but calories in, calories out. That's what it comes down to. And so I would say stick with it, go back to what was working before, but I don't know what you were doing. And so let me actually back up a little bit more. If you are on a diet or were on a diet that was restrictive in some way, let's just pick the keto diet. And all of a sudden you're like, I cannot have a single carbohydrate. It will throw everything off because it does. And you're eating nothing but bacon and hamburgers all day long, or just the meat. I would say that's not a good way to live. That's not sustainable. And so you have to look at a different modification of your diet. And that holds for anybody that's trying to lose weight. And so that's where I think, is a mindset change that is just really hard for people. And I wish I had a better answer than that.
All right. Thank you. Carol, which kind of goes back to your comments, she says she's been overweight all of her life. She finally lost 145 pounds.
Congratulations.
Age 55 and during menopause. It was done the old-fashioned way, diet and exercise. She says she's now 80 and has been successful at keeping it off. So that goes to your point about the old-fashioned way, right?
Well, the old-fashioned way, of course, that was the only way back in the day. Right. But of course, back in the day, it was easier because our lifestyles were different. Again, we didn't have Netflix to sit on the couch for. We had to go out and do something. And the same thing with food. Our food wasn't all full of high fructose corn syrup. It was, basically healthier. But congratulations, that's a wonderful story. And I think those kinds of stories basically highlight the fact that it is not impossible, but I will not suggest that it is easy, because it is not easy either.
No, it's not. Judy says, you mentioned that we don't have data of possible, quote, bad side effects of Ozempic. So how do we make an intelligent decision on whether to use it or not?
So, okay, here's the thing. We have data on the short-term side effects and the side effects to date. So these drugs are reasonably new in terms of their explosive nature in the United States market, but they've actually been in use for quite some time internationally. So there is a bit of data on it, on longer-term use out there. The thing is, there's two elements, the duration of use, but also the number of people that it's used in. So now the use has been explosive. We're using it in an unprecedented number of individuals. There is no way to predict what the potential negative side effect might be. I don't even know if there will be one. And I don't mean to suggest that there will be one, because I don't know that either. I don't know one way or another. I am suggesting that what we don't know, though, is important in terms of the cost-benefit, risk-benefit that we have to calculate. And to your point, there is no way to know. What I can tell you is being substantially overweight, so being, I'm just going to say in the overweight category based on, your body mass index, for example, or whatever measurement you want to use, being in the obese category, especially when you have other metabolic risks, high blood pressure, diabetes, kidney disease. If you have any of that, losing the weight is almost certainly, losing the weight with these medications is almost certainly going to benefit you more than any side effect or harmful effect that we are aware of these medications at this point. So at this point, the risk benefit clearly factors benefit. Like at this point, I don't know what the risks lurking might be. I do know there are risks that will be obvious to some people, like if you develop pancreatitis, then you need to stop the medications. That's kind of a no-brainer. If you are having a little nausea, you might not have to stop the medications. That might be tolerable for you, especially if you are coming from, obese with high blood pressure and diabetes. That's killing you. No question, that's killing you. And a little nausea, that's probably not going to kill you. So that's what you have to weigh.
Okay. Marie wants to know, what about intermittent fasting?
So that's an interesting thing. I am a fan of intermittent fasting myself. It so happens I don't eat at night, and my first meal of the day is usually in the early afternoon. So I spend a great deal of time not eating. What I will tell you about the science or data behind intermittent fasting is that basically it shows that it just leads to people eating less. So you have to keep in mind that, people always used to say breakfast is the most important meal of the day. I question that highly. And I can skip breakfast without a thought. And actually, it's good when I skip breakfast because, again, I eat fewer calories during that day. Now, if, though, I was to make that up by eating a double portioned dinner, then I would not be doing myself any favors. There are some other potential benefits to intermittent fasting having to do with your fat metabolism. But the biggest, most simple benefit to intermittent fasting is that you eat fewer calories. And I am in favor of that. And I have to admit, I actually basically intermittently fast just with my lifestyle.
Okay. There's a question about a natural GLP-1 using berberine. Are you familiar with that at all?
Yeah, so there's a whole, let me just, that goes into the what I'm going to say, I don't want to be pejorative, the basket, I was going to say the waste basket, but it's not really always a waste basket. Some social media ideas are good, but there is a large number of other information that people are trying to squeeze to suggest that there might be substitutes or alternatives to these medications. And I'm going to tell you, at this point, from a science perspective, there is no good alternative to these medications as far as their effect on the GLP receptors. So, any herbal or medicinal, pseudo-medicinal remedy that might claim to have a similar effect probably has a different mechanism. It may help you lose weight. I'm not going to suggest that they're all nonsense, that they won't help in some circumstances, but they're probably not acting in the same way as a GLP-1 from a metabolic physiologic standpoint.
Okay. There were a lot of questions about the intermittent fasting. People kind of interested in that. So I think that's been a big topic, as an alternative to some of the weight loss medications.
Well, it's a lifestyle, and to that point, it is a lifestyle. Like, that is a lifestyle choice that I make by intermittently fasting.
Right. We have a few minutes left. Let's see, what else do we have here? Intermittent fasting. Is it okay to use a GLP-1 if you don't have a gallbladder?
Oh, yeah, it is, actually. Yes, it is.
Okay.
Not having a gallbladder is not an exclusion.
Okay. There's some question about sea moss. Is that something for weight loss? Again, it kind of goes back maybe to the berberine.
Yeah, I mean, there's an infinite number of I hesitate to call them, I don't want to be mean about it or pejorative and suggest they're all nonsense, because that's not really true either. There's a lot of things that we don't know or I don't know that might be beneficial. And I am 100%, I am like completely open-minded to new ideas. What I don't like are when people make unwarranted claims with very limited proof or evidence. That bothers me. And that's where I think a lot of the celebrity endorsements come in. They are unwarranted claims or excessive claims with very thin or empty evidence. So I guess my statement will be buyer beware, be cautious and smart.
Yeah, right. I agree. Somebody wants to know, once you start Ozempic, why do you have to take it for life?
Oh, well, so you don't necessarily, in theory. I mean, like, the whole idea is, in the perfect use case, you use a GLP-1, and I'm just avoiding trade names, but Ozempic is certainly one of them, but use a GLP-1 to kickstart your weight loss, to help you manage it by having a lower appetite. That gets you that motivation. It gets your body weight down. It gets you over that plateau. It gets you over that hump. It gets you down to closer to your ideal body weight. And then in my perfect world, at that same time that you were losing all that weight, you were figuring out the most ideal diet for you. You were getting your body and your brain used to eating that way, at that pace, in that amount. You were exercising more, feeling better about yourself, getting out there and burning more calories. And then you wean yourself off or stop the GLP-1, but you maintain the diet and the exercise, and you don't regain as much of the weight. Because I will say, the science shows that when you stop the GLP-1s, many people will regain some of the weight. I say many and some because it's not all and all, and it's not universal. So there are some people that don't regain any weight. There are some people that regain a lot of weight. These are all averages. But in my perfect world, people would use the GLP-1s to kickstart their journey to a healthier weight. That is not always possible. And right now, the data we have suggests that for people who have significant obesity, significant cardiometabolic problems, and diabetes, GLP-1s may very well be a lifelong solution.
Well, I'm afraid our time is up. Dr. McGeorge, thank you so much for being here. And thank you for all the questions that we had that came in. I hope we were able to answer a lot of those for you. Remember that Ask the Doctor is happening every month. Our next event is February 28th, and it's with a sex therapist. So I'm sure that will be very interesting. Please feel free to sign up for that. And again, thank you so much for attending today. And thank you, Dr. McGeorge, once again. Have a great afternoon.
Take care. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.